Hello, I'm Semily Sherry of Triple Moon, and this morning I wanted to talk to you about love, about the true effect and power of love. Not in the sense of when you're in relationship with someone, obviously in certain situations, not in all, but in certain situations it's a given that you love your family, you love your partner, you love your friends, but in a sense of the wider scheme of things, and particularly with regards to my work in Spirit Release, that's where you can see how the power of love truly works. So I want to tell you a couple of stories, and the first is about a dream I had. And I think this was towards the end of my Spirit Release training course, when I was already beginning to work. I've made a previous video about Spirit Release. I might put a link below in the description so you can go and check that out. But part of that work is clearing spaces, clearing houses, buildings of earthbound spirits or any kind of lingering negative energies that have built up over time. And I think I was preparing to go to a house where they'd had some very unpleasant things happening, and there was some very dark energy that the people who were living there could sense. And I had a really vivid dream. It was one of those dreams that was so real that you woke up thinking that you'd actually been there. And maybe I had. I believe that's possible. Anyway, what happened? It was symbolic, so this was not a literal image of what was going on there and what happened afterwards, but in this dream it was a very dark moonlit night, and I was approaching a house which looked like, very symbolically, your typical spooky haunted house from a horror film or a scary movie. And I was on my own, and I was going into this house, and I knew that I had to handle or deal with the energy that was there. And I could sense that it was not nice. It was not intending good things towards me. It was resisting my presence there. And yes, there was a little bit of apprehension and fear there, but I knew that I had to carry on. And anyway, I continued on into this house, and I entered. And I stood for a moment and sensing where the core of this really dark energy and presence that had a very strong personality and character of its own was coming from. And I followed that inner guidance system that led me right through the house, up many staircases. It was one of those big old Victorian, buildings with several stories. And I ended up right at the top of the house until I reached the door that opened onto the room where I knew the source of this energy was. And I really didn't want to open the door, but I grounded and centered myself, called in my spiritual protection, my team, to surround me. And I opened the door, and inside, at the center of this energy that was emanating out, was a very tall, thin, dark-haired man who, again, looked a little bit archetypically evil. He was dressed in black, he had dark hair, a very pale face. And I knew that he was the source of the discomfort, the disturbance of energy in the house. And I knew I had to have a conversation with him. That's part of Spirit Release, because all Spirit Release is done from compassion, from care. So it's not about banishing, exorcising, saying, be gone. It's about finding out what is holding the presence of that spirit there. I knew this was an earthbound spirit. Why was it still there? And then releasing any barriers to allowing it to move on to whatever dimension it should belong to, either to return or to go into the light. And as I walked towards this scary figure, the closer I got, I found the fear and the apprehension and the seeing of this person as someone evil, someone to be confronted, if you like, my heart began to open. And I felt such love pouring out of me for this being. And so I didn't say anything. I just, keeping my eyes locked on the eyes of this figure, I walked towards him and I simply took hold of his hand and I held his hand. And looking into his eyes, I just beamed all the love that I was sensing flowing through me towards him. And I watched this cold, hard face melt and soften, and tears begin to run down his face as he felt, for the first time in what I think was a few centuries, love and acceptance. And that energy dissipated and it was transmuted into light. And I knew my work was done. And I woke up with that overwhelming sense of, wow, it was that simple. It was love. He was looking for love, and that released him to be able to make his journey over into the light. That's actually what happened. And so it's really hard to explain, but when you feel that energy in action, it is astonishing at how powerful it is. And then shortly after that, I did in fact visit the house that I had been invited to go and work on. And sure enough, there was a presence there of an earthbound spirit, a male, who had in his lifetime done some pretty nasty things. And because of his worldview at the time, when it came to his death, he believed that he'd been consigned to the fires of hell. And so he resisted the process of death, and he resisted the passing over into the light. He had been terrified of the judgment and the punishment that was going to fall down upon him. So remembering the energy of that dream, I just began to open my heart towards him and hold him in love, and I called in light beings, some people might call them angelic beings, just to come and allow him to experience the presence of the light and that love with no threat, just to be near him, so that he could feel what it was that he was moving into, to take away that fear. And again, in real time, I was standing there as these angelic light beings came to surround this figure. And at first I could feel in him that, you know, oh, what are these beings? They're going to drag me away. Where are they going to take me? And then there was suddenly this presence of so much love around him. This earthbound spirit again sensed that. And I began to sob as he began to sob, as he realized that there was no judgment. There were no fires of hell he was going to be dragged off to. He could be forgiven. He was forgiven. And I was in tears. The lady whose house it was in tears because she could sense this energy too. And he was released into the light, feeling incredibly sorry and for what he'd done, and for realizing he could see from that space of love everything he'd done, and that it was a learning experience in his life. And that, yes, he needed to review that behaviour and learn from it, but that he could be forgiven. And that's what was keeping him earthbound, this fear of the judgment and the punishment that was going to fall upon him. And I know from my experience of working now with Spirit Release, that doesn't exist. There's learning, yes. There's accounting for your behaviour, yes. But there's never any judgment or condemnation. There's only love, only forgiveness. And I just find that remarkable. And I wanted to share those stories with you And I know it's not an experience many may have if you don't work in this area. But just to bear that in mind, whenever you're in a situation that feels threatening to you, that makes you feel fearful, if you're up against someone that you feel is cold and hard, if you can just hold that energy of love and acceptance in your own heart, it can move mountains. It can have a tremendous effect. I wish I could explain that more clearly somehow. I wish I could give you the experience of what it felt like in that dream and in that experience then of working with an earthbound spirit. But I just know that in all my work, and I've come across some pretty lost, dark energies, but there is always that spark of light inside them. And many barriers can build up to them feeling that light. But once they are put back in touch with it, it changes everything. So never underestimate the power of you holding someone in love and acceptance. No matter what you might think of their behavior or what they're doing, you don't have to condone that. But know that just allowing them perhaps to have a slight experience of what that is, of what that love and acceptance feels like, it can melt away all the fear that they're holding, because have no doubt, anyone who is acting in a harmful way towards others, it's coming from some deep-rooted fear and hurt within themselves. Whenever you hold someone in that energy, it has the power to transform. And if there is one thing that I know that can transform the world right now, it's the energy of that power and love. And the knowledge that that divine spark of connection exists within all of us. All of us. All of creation holds that spark within it. And to know that, and to honour that, and to be able to still love that in someone that in other ways you just cannot hold as good or kind, is an incredibly powerful energy and tool to use. So that's it, really. I'm going to leave it there. Allow that image and that knowledge to sink into you. And I send you, as always, so much love and my blessings. And I'll speak to you again soon.